Hi, I'm Bybreen and welcome back. On Sunday, September the 13th, there is a solar eclipse in Virgo. That means there's a new moon, which is new beginnings. So we have the sun and the moon, and they are in conjunction with each other. And when planets conjunct each other, it basically means that the energies of the two planets are merging and fusing together. But what is it that actually turns a new moon into a solar eclipse? Well, that's because of the position of the nodes. And so in the astrological chart, you have two nodes. You have a north node and you have a south node. So the north node is pointing towards the direction, what life is calling us towards, how we are able to grow when we step into this future vision of ourselves. Then we have the south node, which is everything we bring from our past. And so it's our identity, our resources, our attitudes, our ways of being. And so we have the sun in Virgo, which is the solar eclipse, and it's opposing Chiron, which is in Pisces. And so before I get into the nuances of that, I just want to touch on what it is that actually creates the nodes. And so we have the path of the Earth's orbit around the sun, which causes the ecliptic. And then we have the moon crossing the ecliptic. And when this happens, it creates the nodes. And so the sun connects with the nodes within 18 degrees of the nodes. And it takes 36 days to actually travel across the nodes. And so the solar eclipse is an opportunity for all of us to begin transforming parts of our past which we've been hurt by. Think of a solar eclipse like a spotlight that's been shone on a particular area in your life. It's illuminating every area of pain, sorrow, angst, anxiety that you've experienced, but you have suppressed it, you've buried it, you've swept it under the carpet, you've ignored it because the pain of the experiences has been too much for you to bear. So when you have the solar eclipse, it's a great time for healing. The solar eclipse also shows us where and how we get in our own way, and by doing so, we block our own development. So all of this is happening in Virgo, and so what we also have is the sun is opposing, it's a tight opposition with Chiron, which is in Pisces. So when Chiron shows up in the chart, Chiron is the wounded healer. It's the part of us that feels separated. And the separation is between our spiritual self as well as our instinctual self. The separation also is about our sense of individuality and the need for that, but also having this need to be part of the collective. And where the separation exists, it causes us great pain and suffering. So what we're trying to do, and what the solar eclipse is inviting us to do, is to navigate that terrain where we can work our way back to our core sense of our identity. Because when you have the sun and Chiron, you're talking about a wound that has struck at the core of your identity. And what happens when we suppress the pains that we've experienced? We might begin to live Chiron in a very vicarious way. And what I mean by this is that we project the healing and suffering. So we might identify with causes of people who have been oppressed, or we might take on the problems and the stresses and burdens of other people, and so we're helping them alleviate their suffering. But by suppressing our own suffering, we are committing another wound to who we are. So we're not aiding ourselves. What happens then is that what we've done is we've started to build up walls around us, and so we can't get out, we can't break out, and nobody can come in. So it's a time to mediate between your core identity and your suffering. One of the mediums that we all tap into, music, which is a very collective experience, is a great way for us to begin to navigate the human condition. there's a whole spectrum of music. All music touches on that in one form or another. And so there's always imbued within music this sense of belonging and longing and feeling and desire. And so what we're longing for is to belong, a sense of unity. We're longing for love, we're longing for hope, redemption. And so these are just some of the human qualities that we're all exposed to and have experienced in one form or another. So if you think of music, take the roots of Bob Marley, take the blues of Billie Holiday, the jazz of Gregory Porter and the soul of Jared Lawson are just 4 examples of people who are singing about the human condition. So that gives you a sense of what it means, the sun Chiron. There's been this split and we're now trying to navigate our way back towards a sense of wholeness. Another way to think of sun Chiron is that we're in mourning, and so when we begin to show up and face the wounds that we've experienced, we're grieving and we're mourning, which actually has a positive benefit to it, because it sets us on the path of our own self-discovery and it's our self-healing. And so here, what we're seeking to do is to bring structure to our inner world of feelings, perceptions, wounds. We're trying to structure it so that we're not projecting and diffusing it. And that's where we have Virgo, which is about form and structure, to what appears to be quite nebulous, which is around feelings and perceptions. And so there could be a tussle between these two, but if you don't resist it, it's a great aid to begin opening us up to our journey of transformation. What also aids us is because Chiron is in Pisces, which is a sign of great sensitivity. And Pisces is a water sign and it's ruled by Neptune. And the Greek name for Neptune is Poseidon. And Poseidon got his name from the water goddess Ida. And so what we have is Chiron being encouraged to dive back into the ocean of life. So all of us have Chiron. And so a way for us to begin healing ourselves is to plunge back into the oceans of our life so that we can be cleansed and purged and then undergo a rebirth. And when we're reborn, the idea is for us to experience a greater sense of our core identity. So that's Sun Chiron on a personal level, but as always, the planets show themselves in the public arena. So whereas last week I spoke about the connection between Jupiter and Neptune, but also it was the square between Saturn and Neptune. And I indicated the plight that refugees are suffering around the world. Well, we can see this played out again, but we're using the Sun and Chiron. And an example of this is the American campaign group Black Lives Matter. And what they're doing is raising the awareness of the unlawful killing of black men in America. And by doing so, it has lanced a boil. So it's generating feelings of anger and fear and guilt and pain and sorrow and tension. And if we think about it from a musician's point of view, what this drama that's taken place in America is being scored by the prophetic lyrics that were written by Gil Scott-Heron 40, 50 years ago. And so he was able to give an indication of what the future could look like in America. And sadly, we're seeing this being played out in terms of the impact of what's happening. And so when we think about the Sun and Chiron in a public space, we have the Sun, which could be seen as the American identity. It's been wounded because of the killing of the unlawful killing of black men in America, but also it presents an opportunity for America to begin to heal its cultural identity. And so that's where you can see the whole theme still being played out on the public arena. One of the questions that you can begin asking yourself in terms of how you get into your own personal journey around this, a question for you is, are you prepared to sacrifice your suffering? Are you prepared to give that up? Because we're dealing with Neptune, which is about sacrifice. Something has to give in order to change. And then the follow-on question to that is, imagine what life would be like if you sacrificed your suffering and you no longer had to deal with a constant source of pain. Who could you become? What opportunities could open up to you that you begin moving towards the North Node, the calling for your life? So that's what I want to leave you with. And there's one other thing. There's a quote that I'd like to share with you, and it was written by Mark Twain. And he says that forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that crushed it. And so given that we're dealing with the themes of forgiveness, how can you begin to forgive yourself for the wounds that you've inflicted on yourself, but also how can you begin to forgive those who have hurt you in the past? So I'll leave you to ponder on that, and I will see you again another time.